Greetings everybody and welcome back to another episode of Building with Fret. And today I have an exciting project in mind. Today we are going to take on the biggest challenge so far in this series. And what we're going to do is head over to a new area just over here. We are going to break ground today on the farming settlement. Yes, I know, exciting. So, this is going to be one of the biggest tasks I've ever undertaken in this playthrough. Probably the biggest task in this playthrough. And we're going to need all the time that we can afford, so I'm going to get right into it today. And I'm going to run you through the initial steps in order to do that. So this is the area we are going to be building the farming settlement in. And right now, as you can see, it is covered in trees. That's not going to be very useful for building fields of wheat and windmills and many more things. As you can see, the trees over here are decaying a little bit. This must be new terrain. So, what I intend to do is I brought some chests along with me here so we could set up a little way station near the beginning. I'm going to cut down most of these trees. We need the wood from them anyway. And I also need to reshape the terrain quite a lot. We are going to be building two little streams that connect together and flow into our main lake over there. This is going to be the settlement of Twin Stream. So that's going to be my initial first step here to get this going. So I'm going to get to work on cutting down some trees and we'll look at starting to shape this terrain. With that, we can now see what we're working with a lot easier. So, I've spent quite some time cutting down trees. I used up one full diamond axe. This is the amount of wood I got from it. And I got some extra as well. I set these chests down. I went and fetched my other diamond axe from over that way. There was not much durability left on that one though. Use that up too. The next step that I want to do is overhaul the terrain here. I'm going to build some custom terrain, which is it's a very big task. It's one of the biggest I've done. And the way that I've decided to do this is, again, using that Axiom tool I've shown before. I designed this terrain in a creative world, and then I have that to use as a reference here to build in our actual world. So I'm going to get on with that, and I will provide a progress report as I work on that. And maybe we will take a look at just how I've done the terrain using the Axiom tool, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about that. This is the Axiom tool that I have used in the creative world here, so I can show you an example of how we built those rivers. I decided to use the Sculpt Draw tool, and you can access this by bringing up the advanced mode here by pressing right shift on your keyboard. And I reduced the radius of the brush down to 2. I changed the strength down to 0.3. And I turned on the invert option, and then I was able to sketch out my rivers just by drawing like that in the world. The invert option is the key here, as that changes it from building and raising up the terrain to actually being able to carve the river. And I think this was an interesting technique. I also used the Sculpt Draw tool to actually build up the terrain as well. But I used a larger brush with some strength, and then sort of, I can show you here. and then sort of raised up the terrain. And then I used the smooth tool to kind of smooth this out a little bit. That's how I built the terrain and the rivers. Now, specifically with the rivers, I started with a very small brush with the stream up here, and then I increased the brush size the further I got towards the lake. That way I could simulate the effect of the river growing wider and bigger the longer it traveled, which is pretty typical of rivers in the real world. Here is the first progress report. I've started to carve out the river here, which is going to run through into the two streams further up here. Started to shape the terrain a little bit. I would say it's going well. I really like the variation here in the river, different levels and the kind of rough edges. It's going well. Another progress report from me. I've started to lay out some guidelines now for the terrain that I want to build based on what I created before. And why would I want to make guidelines? Put simply, it is a time-saving activity. Rather than trying to replicate what I've done block for block, having these guidelines makes it so that I already know the shape of the terrain based on what I designed before. All I need to do is fill in underneath it and then fill in the gaps with dirt, and the terrain will look exactly how I want it to. So I'm going to fill in the underneath here with stone and then cover it in a layer of dirt, which will spread into grass, and I will fully replicate what it is I'm looking for. And it's pretty easy to create these guidelines, just following what I've designed and right-clicking with the dirt. Pretty easy to do. Some parts of the terrain, though, guidelines aren't an effective solution. You can't always use this everywhere. I would say anything that is very steep or very detailed, it becomes more tricky. An example for me in this build is the cliff sections around the river, which is going to be over here. It is quite tricky to actually build guidelines around it, especially when working with other materials like stone, cobblestone, and so on. So what I'm going to do is actually build these block for block over here. And then I'll do the guidelines in this section back here, and we should be ready to go with filling everything in. Another progress report. I've added more dirt lines to this now, and I'm feeling like it's time to start filling these in with cobble underneath and then dirt on top to start creating that custom terrain. we go. The terrain is now finished, on the surface level at least. Now the terrain is complete, I'd just like to take a moment to talk a little further about why I chose to make custom terrain for this particular project that I'm working on. The first and sort of primary reason I wanted to do that was I had this idea in my mind of streams and making the village of twin streams, so two streams that came from different points over here and kind of merged together and went down into our big lake down there. And as part of that, streams and rivers typically and pretty much always only flow downhill. In the real world, they often start at the top of hills or mountains, and they flow downwards through these tributaries. So that's why I wanted to build custom terrain, was to create a space at a higher level and then gradually work our way down to the bottom down there. Secondly, I did feel like the existing terrain that was already here was pretty flat and kind of boring. There wasn't a lot of variation in the terrain. And one thing I really like to do in my builds is add height and different levels of elevation. We've talked about that before in previous projects. As you can see here, we've got some cliffs going on, both in the rivers, or the streams, not the rivers, the streams, and the cliffside here, just to create this feeling of different height. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it could really add a lot to a build when you can see different structures at different heights. And I just think it adds that extra level of detail, and it's something I really, really like. The third reason is that I want to kind of iterate and improve on all aspects of my building as we progress in our world here. And this felt like kind of a next step for us. We hadn't really done custom terrain on this scale yet. And I think it's turned out pretty well. The whole process from designing it to actually creating it here in the world has gone quite well, I would say. I've improved on designing the cliffs here around the streams, and on the hillside here we've got some cobble and mossy mixed in there. Eventually we'll be able to add a few more details to it as well. I want to add maybe some buttons and pressure plates and some leaves, and I think that will really even add more detail to it here and there. In the actual streams themselves, we've got a mixture of gravel and cobblestone in here. This grass will eventually turn to dirt when I put the water in. And I think that just adds a very subtle texture change, so we're not just looking at the same thing. If I had more of it, I'd probably add some clay as well, but I don't have a whole lot of that just at the moment. But I like that. It just kind of breaks up the texture and adds something a little bit different. It'll be blending quite well after the water goes on top as well there. So we've kind of improved on a lot of different things from what we did in the first major build over there, the woodcutting camp, with the terrain for this one. And we can go even further as we add the water in the streams here, and we also add some boulders and trees and obviously structures and everything around. We can add a lot more to this. However, there is still one problem remaining right now, and that particular problem is over here. Let me take a wander and I will show you. And I'm going to need these as well. So down here is underneath my custom terrain. And as you can see, it is a huge open space down here. I've started to try and fill this in with cobble here and there. Because the terrain is only one thick, that's going to cause problems for me trying to add paths, boulders, and other details as I start to dig it out. So I've been putting in this cobble to add support. I also want to protect it from creeper blasts. This is something I do recommend if you are doing any kind of custom terrain at all, is make it at least 2 blocks thick. if not 3 or even more. In my case, it's a lot of cobble to fill all this in. I don't really have a lot of other materials that I could choose from. And I want something with decent blast resistance because of the creeper situation. So I guess what I'm going to have to do now is go to maybe the passive mob farm and the branch mine and maybe do some mining, try and get some more cobble so that I can begin to fill some of this in. There's a lot of space that is still just the one block there, and I would like to try and do something with that so that we can make building the paths and such easier up here as we start and add buildings in. This project as a whole so far has taken me more than a week to do all of this, playing for a couple of hours each day, and we're not even close to being done yet. So I'm going to get back to work. After many hours of mining and placing cobblestone, I have finally finished this step. This was a lot of effort. I have been through many double chests of cobblestone. I've done a lot of mining of cobblestone at the passive mob farm area. But now, all of the dirt above is protected by at least 2 layers. Oh, I guess I missed this. I'll have to fill that in. I have some cobble for that. It's all, apart from that, all of it is protected by 2 layers of cobblestone, which should act as a barrier just in case a creeper happens to blow up, or I'm changing the terrain to put paths in and things like that. There is a layer of protection now. And that concludes that. I'm not going to fill all of it in because that would require a lot more cobblestone, and I've spent probably more than 10 hours mining the cobblestone to get to this point. Later on, I'll get some other material and fill in the rest at some point. The next step is to put water in and make our streams here. And in order to do that, I have made myself a temporary block of some kind. In this case, it's going to be planks. The reason I chose planks is it's fairly easy to break, and it does not interfere with my design here in the river, which is predominantly grass/dirt, gravel, and cobblestone. So I know if I break a wooden plank, it's not supposed to be there. It's an easy way of doing that. And I'm going to set up streams along multiple levels and get it to run all the way to the lake. And here is the finished stream on this side. I've got all of the streams complete now, all the way down to the lake in the middle there. We've got some layers of water here just by adding edges. I tried to make it a little bit more interesting by doing some diagonals and interesting shapes. Just makes the water flow down, my opinion, quite nicely. You get a cool looking effect there. This flows into the big stream there. We have the same thing over here as well, which goes all the way up to where you can see that water source tile in the distance there. Looking very, very nice. And you can see that I have some pressure plates and buttons in my inventory here. And this is something else I wanted to share with you. Another little technique, which I think is quite interesting, is to add some pressure plates and buttons to your cliffs. This is a new technique I'm experimenting with a little bit. of just adding details here and there. I think it makes it just that little bit more interesting. There's a little bit more going on. It's very subtle, but it just adds a little bit more detail. And after all, that's what we're all about, is adding detail. But quite subtle, like I say. We don't want to overdo it, because if we do, then it ends up looking really busy. So just here and there, adding a few buttons and pressure plates, it can really make a big difference. Let's take a look, see what we've done up to this point. Yeah, again, it's subtle. We could probably use a few more pressure plates here and there. I think we've got a good amount of buttons now. But it just adds another layer of detail to this. Can add a couple of extra pressure plates maybe, just here and there. I am really pleased with how this has turned out, from concept to completion. And this is only the terrain. The actual build that I want to put here, we haven't actually managed to get to yet. But I think it's a great start. There we go. Let's take a look. Oh yeah. That's better. So it's very subtle, but it just adds another layer of detail. What I would further add to this now is some reeds, some leaves, and maybe even some flowers as well. And it just really brings it all together. Some of these blocks here, I clearly need to get grass to spread to. There's just no grass nearby for that to happen right now. So I'll do that as well. We'll take the torches out. And that will be a really nice looking cliff. I'm going to go ahead and do that to the other cliffs as well around here. And we'll be able to check in on that. This episode has taken several weeks to put together, from concepting out the terrain to actually building it, to gathering all the materials to fill in underneath to make it secure, and put the water in. And this is kind of the last step. I was hoping that we would have time in this episode to actually do some building in our new terrain, but I think we are out of time, unfortunately. So next episode will be entirely dedicated to adding builds into our lovely new terrain here. Our farming settlement, farming village will come together. So in the next episode, we'll look at houses, we'll look at wheat fields and windmills. We're really creating something special here. We're leveling up, you know, we're getting better with each build that we make. And I've got a really good feeling about this. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. I know that a lot of it was kind of cut out. There was a lot to do. But hopefully you've learned something new about building terrain here on the next level up. And I look forward to seeing you again in the following episode, okay? Thanks for watching. Take care. See you in the next one.